Hello and welcome to the Canon podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network for in-depth commentary and discussion on lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I am joined all the way across the continent by your friend and mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
I'm good. I'm excited for today's topic.
Right on, yeah. It's a pretty heavy, pretty hefty topic. We're doing another deep dive going through the formation of the Rebel Alliance as told in the current canon storyline. First, getting our plugs in at the top. You can follow us at Ion Canon Pod, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find all our episodes right here on YouTube on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel, as well as our own Ion Canon Twitch channel on our Twitter. We're going live on Twitter as well. And of course, on audio only on our Spotify and Apple Podcasts feed, just podcast feeds plural. Just look up Ion Canon. Also had the tractor beam this week. Got Darth Vader number 26 on in the works there, in the pipe there. Really another interesting Sabe story, Anakin Vader Sabe story, and of course Hyperspace Stories number 2 with friend of the pod Megan Wong doing the art there. Really interesting comics, interesting stories. So check that out every Thursday and Friday. I wanted to plug my little comics reviews, and again, as always, at Ion Canon Pod, Twitter and Instagram. Okay, before we dive into the eyes on screen, because we know we're getting there. Joel, you had a week of musings, you had a week of things, and this will tie into our main topic. But if you want to go ahead and dive into some of your musings this week.
Yes. So, one of the things we've always talked about, and we talked a little about in the Prince of the Scoundrel, is sort of the rapid decline of the mighty galactic empire and all its Star Destroyer glory. And with Andor coming out, we definitely have going very back into the height of Imperial control before the Death Star comes. And I think they have done a good job of reconciling what I think was more or less an editorial decision to have the Empire just go away so quickly, because we did that in Legends where it was dragged out, and we don't want to do that again. To where they do make the Empire very much a paper tiger of an organization, where it's like, yeah, even back then, we see the pockets of rebellion spreading as, even the Empire trying to maintain control. 1138, good. Well, they're not a friend of the podcast, but they're definitely a place I follow. Did a nice little tweet thread detailing their thoughts on the fall of the rebellion. And I even added this as well to Rise of Skywalker to go even further to the whole People's Fleet at the end of Tross, and perhaps Mando unintentionally, maybe more than intentionally, sowing the seeds of that by showing the Mandalorian helping with those communities, as like Navarro and other places, and even Boa, like making Tatooine a better place throughout the post-Endor era as well, so that even when the First Order becomes in charge, a lot of the Outer Rim is probably a lot more ready to fight in that regard. So yeah, that's my musings for this week.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the influence of Seventh Samurai on Star Wars going back before 1977, 1975. George Lucas in those original scripts that made it into Return of the Jedi. But yeah, you have stories in The Mandalorian, the little people, if you will, like us normal folks who, I mean, some folks who have starships. I don't have a starship, but folks rising up and having our heroes go and defend them. Yeah, there's definitely something to that. We are gonna, as mentioned, we are gonna pick that up in our main topic. I want to, for my eyes on my this week in Star Wars, this is a bit of a grab bag, this segment, and so I will, in true Tales from Beyond the Galaxy fashion, shout out to our sibling podcast every Wednesday night at 8:30 Eastern, 7:30 Central on, I believe, their own YouTube channel. I know they're only on their Twitch. Anyway, shout out to them. I'm going to take the indulge myself and start with something outside of Star Wars first. And in our Discord, Joel, you and I had a little conversation about Rings of Power, and yeah, and we disagreed on we feel differently about that show, and that's fair. What it brought up to me is the way I'm having trouble caring about that show at first I thought it was because everything I can just draw a straight line. Oh, this is how this started, and this is how this started, and so this is all mechanically connected and almost mechanistically connected to what we have in the Peter Jackson films. And so I'm having trouble finding the drama and the tension in it. But then you bring up, we all bring up, well, first of all, House of the Dragon, which is another show we're all watching, and then
That me, I'm not watching. I don't.
you're not watching. Fair enough. But another show I'm watching that is also a prequel, but less connected to the Game of Thrones story that we've all had for a number of years now. But I'm loving that show, and whether or not it's connected, doesn't seem to be relevant. And then, of course, yes, finally bring it back to Star Wars. We have, we have Andor, we have Kenobi, and we have Rebels, and we have all these things that are prequel-ish. And then, of course, we have my favorite era called the prequel trilogy, and then my favorite era right now, the High Republic, also connected. And I'm still, connected. And High Republic I've often commented as a prequel proper, right? This is how we get from the Jedi at their height to leaders, generals in a clone war, to Darth Sidious forming the Empire and wiping them out. And so it raises the question, does it matter how connected a prequel is to the quote unquote main story? And of course, part of the question there is, when does a prequel become a mainquel itself? And the answer to me is, and I this is for me the contrast with Rings of Power, is the story itself, the characters themselves, I connect with, regardless of whether or not it's connected to what happens. It has to logically follow, it has to logically connect, but because I found the story of Anakin and Obi-Wan and Padme so compelling already, okay, sure, yeah, we know Anakin has to follow the dark side and become Darth Vader. We know this Senator Palpatine, forms the Empire and becomes this grisly old emperor, right? But it's I mean, maybe it all comes down to execution. And so the classic thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the reason this is important to bring up then is the problem with prequels is not that we know what happens at the end. We often thought it was, and that we often critique prequels for that reason. But Rings of Power is, and the contrast between, in my own perception of it, and Joel, you I mean, maybe the fact that you feel differently about it is actually demonstrates the point, in that you are compelled, seemingly, it seems to be, by the characters and by the story and by everything that's happening.
I love
yes,
making
insofar
Anakin jokes.
Yeah, yes, insofar as it connects to the Lord of the Rings, and not just the Peter Jackson films, but the Tolkien books, but also just the characters and action story in itself. I mean, everything to do with Elrond and Durin. I mean, I'm here for that too. That's pretty great. But
Right.
yeah, it's just coming back to this deeper question of, you got to get, whatever you're going to do, whatever story you're going to tell, yes, tell a prequel, that's fine. Tell me again with Starlight Beacon and Elzar and Avar and Stellan and them, and of course with Bell and well, I'm blanking on my favorite era here, but all the younger Padawan characters. My guy Reith Silas, give me a good story, and it'll be fun, it'll be interesting, it'll be engaging then to see how it connects. So that was my musing this week. What do you have thoughts?
I mean, I think you said it earlier. It's all about execution, right? Trust me. There were. Oh shoot. Okay, you're back. You got
just
a little
fixing my camera.
Like there are plenty of people, probably to this day, you look for them who still don't think Anakin is a compelling character. To each their own, as I say. Some people said that about Rogue One too. It's like, what's the point? They all died. Well, we didn't know they would all die, but they did all die, and they should have all died. Quite frankly, I think the story was bold enough for that. Same with Andor. It's like, well, we know what happens to Andor. He's gonna die.
Sure.
At the end of the day, it's all about the execution, and if an execution can also be subjective in some ways too. It's like, people are happy with Rings of Power, others aren't. People love the Star Wars prequels, others don't. Same with pretty much. I mean, people probably don't like Andor too.
There are some people, I've seen takes. They're bored of it for some reason. I don't know.
It's definitely not the. We'll get to that. It's definitely not the not the typical Star Wars. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But no, I think at the end of the day, it is all about execution. I'm someone who genuinely believes in it's the journey, not the destination. Like, trust me, there are plenty of stories that are quite predictable at the end of the day. It's like, but I still get invested in them. That's why I'm not that kind of about spoilers, because like, hey man, actually I get more interested. Like, ooh, cool. So like, that's to me why spoilers don't bother me super much eventually, especially for something that's been out for a long time.
Right.
And obviously I don't like go like Darth Vader was Luke's father after I run out of the theater. But no, I think you hit a nail on the head. It's execution, and sometimes the execution works, sometimes it doesn't.
Maybe that's what it is with Rings of Power. I feel like I'm spoiled by the ending of it. I don't know. But yeah, you're right. Anyway, let's get to that right now. So there was a new Star Wars that hit Disney Plus on Wednesday. I'm sure we've all seen it. This is going to be completely spoilery. Joel, you've had occasion. You went on to Doc's channel, I believe. You've gone in different places to talk about it. But here's your show. Go nuts. What did you think of? I mean, quickly, kind of not too detailed, but what did you think of Andor? Episodes
it won't
1
be
to
3
3,
hours, I promise you.
Okay.
No, I really liked it. It's definitely a very unique Star Wars. It's not your kind of the mill Star Wars show. But I think that's good for that. It definitely tension. There's a lot of tension to it. Not action heavy, but you can still feel like the tension everywhere. It's probably the best look at the dystopian universe that the Star Wars galaxy has become under the Empire. And just with the mega corporations and just sort of this mining town. It was good to see the first 3 episodes start in a more localized working class type of feel to it before we get to the bigger stuff, because that's something I really wanted. I think Star Wars should try to do a bit more, like show how the big peoples, the Mon Mothmas and the Leias and the Padmes affect the little peoples. This mining town, this working class this working class place. Obviously there was a good thread I retweeted about how this is very much a good story of the Hispanic immigrant tale. And overall, very curious to see the intrigue. I think my favorite character is probably the Inspector guy, who's probably the most unique villain of Star Wars we've had to date. But overall, really excited. Can't wait to see what Tony Gilroy gives us. And kind of curious to see kind of just the backstory and conspiracies going on here, because I think there's more than meets the eye on Canon. This series. So I'm very excited to see where this all goes.
Yeah, you mentioned Karn, and it's interesting. The in your notes you put in this interview from Tony Gilroy, who talks about Saw Gerrera and Luthen Rael and the extremists on one side. I mean, Karn is the making of an extremist, right? He is He is going to be one of those hardcore Imperial believers by the end of this, and
he's also really tragic. I think
it is, and to see how that happens. How does someone become so radicalized for this regime? I mean, like, it happened in the 1930s in Germany, right? It happens. It happened in, hate to bring it up again, it happened in the 2000s in the United States. It happens all over the place. Happened in the Middle East in the 2000s as well, right? How does that happen? So I'm loving it. There's a lot that we're gonna see how things play out, like you said. Hopefully, like, again, just taking from your notes here, hopefully we got Mon Mothma on Wednesday, and but it's interesting little tidbits, and I'll get to the tidbits in a second. You mentioned the first time we hear the word calf on screen. I think this is the first time we see BBY used as an actual thing.
Yes.
Which of course doesn't make sense in universe, but to us, we just need to know.
I actually I hate to cut you off for a second, but I did some research about the years. When I was talking to some friends, because we were like, "Oh, what's happening during this time?" So, 5 BBY, So this is season 1 of Rebels, but this is before Ezra gives his little speech on Lothal. So that's 4 BBY, and Andor's going to take place in 5 BBY. And Mon Mothma doesn't leave the Senate and does her thing until 2 BBY. So my guess is we don't see that moment, if we see it at all, until season 2. So I did the math.
So here's what my understanding of this though is this Wednesday is going to be 4 BBY.
Is it?
Or
I thought...
maybe I could be wrong, but I mean,
I think you're getting confused with season 2.
Is it that? So from what I'm wondering, thinking about from Celebration 2022, not from 2020, they were saying that season 1 is going to be the first 4 years, and then it's the other way around. So this is going to be the first season year, 1, and then season 2 is going to be the 4 years.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Okay. So this.
I know that gets confusing for people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's thanks for clearing that up. I appreciate that. I mean, what that prepares us for, thing we need to actually remember for this and for House of the Dragon and for Rings of Power and for etc. Multi-season stories are back, and we're, at least for Star Wars, we aren't used to that. We're used to The Mandalorian really being season 1 being one contained story, Picard season 1 being one contained story. You know, these seasons now, these 3 shows that we've been talking about, these seasons are not contained. The stories aren't contained within the season. Hopefully, some sort of satisfactory thing that leads us off, but for reasons to keep watching after. I'll get into my last thought here. I wanted to say this was so my thoughts, and this was a journey I went on. So I'm going to take you guys on a journey here. Republic officers, and you guys know where this goes. So, and I subtitled this "A Tale of Two Fan Services," meaning, two approaches to fan service and whatnot. So, when I saw that, knowing clearly they have separatist patches on their uniforms and whatnot, I was like, "Oh, he's just Tony Gilroy." So I had this in my head, the whole thing about I'm not going to do fan service. I'm not going to do fan service. So in my head, for some reason, I was like, oh, he's just not going to care about details. And the Republic officers, and this is Marta Andor, that's her name.
Marta, and Petunia from Harry Potter.
Maybe I'm thinking Marta Rowe. I don't know. Anyway, Republic officers, and she just as a throwaway, the institution, whatever. And I thought, oh, is Tony Gilroy not going to care about these? It's going to be just empty terms. And did somebody make an editing mistake or something, kind of like with Leia not hugging Chewie at the end of Force Awakens, or something like that, or some script mistake, or the actor or something, trying to chalk it up to that.
Props.
Yeah, a prop mistake or something silly like that. Anyway, all these different possibilities that Alex Damon, for example, goes through, and he refutes this as well, but. Then the discussion comes. Then the discussion happens. So this is like from Wednesday to Thursday to Friday. People in our Discord started speculating. Oh, what if they're undercover? I think Joel, you mentioned maybe what if they're undercover, or what if I think Alex was saying what if there's this toxic waste thing that's happening, and that has to do with the Imperial mining disaster, whatever that is later on. What if the Republic are trying to save their butts and blame the Separatists on it, so they quickly switch the uniforms, different things like that. And what it gets at then is we actually go from Tony Gilroy saying I'm not going to do fan service to Tony Gilroy is giving us the best kind of fan service, because it's the fan service that is not in a bad way, but details and backstory, or making us speculate on backstory and have those discussions that have fueled Star Wars for decades, right? I mean, the kids in 1980 on the schoolyard be like, is Darth Vader really Luke's father? And not knowing until 1983, right? Having to wait 3 years for that to be confirmed, and spending all that time thinking about it. We only have to really spend maybe even a number of weeks thinking about what happened, but all that to say is, this show looks to really be nailing finally, I think for once, that incredibly delicate balance. I'm okay if they don't try and nail the balance. I'm okay if they go for, like, Kenobi went hardcore into the prequel fans, and I'm here for it. But when Andor especially tries to nail this incredibly delicate balance between what Star Wars fans who know the story and know the history and are invested in all these details of lore, what they can bring out of it, and then the casual fans, the rest of the fandom, fans who are watching, who or maybe who like spy movies or spy stories or historical stories, who don't really care so much about those specifics of the details, but as long as the details work, then then they'll be into it, as long as bringing back, as long as the characters work. And so, which gets me to another thing about how this kind of fudges some things about and Cassian's own backstory. We thought, I mean, here's the thing: is the source book said he was with separatists, and that still may be the case. We don't know, but I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old. I mean, this got recontextualized a little bit, as long as it works for the character and for his motivations. Yeah, his fest. I mean, but they kind of recontextualized. I mean, they address it, right? They say, okay, Fest, that's just his cover story to hide where he was really from. And fair enough, it was done well. And that's my point. It was done well. All I ask of all of these flashbacks is, does it create a believable sense of Andor is associating the Empire with the evil that it is, and doing it because he's associating with the evil that the Republic was. And this gets at another thing you mentioned again in the Discord. So, by the way, if you want to join the Discord, send us a DM. It's the Star Wars Underworld Discord. We got lots of conversations going on there. Send us a DM. Anyway, another thing you said is, what about the Republic being the bad guys, being the hostiles? And because the Republic was already the Empire. And so, why it was, I mean, that's what Maul says in Siege of Mandalore. It's already been given away. So Lucas, he might have been kind of willy-nilly flaky on the details about these things. One thing he did say was that democracies aren't taken by force; they're given away. And I think one of the things this show is going to do is give us more of that perspective, dive in a way that the Clone Wars series didn't, because it's kind of Republic propaganda. It does a little bit, it touches on it, but I mean, Bad Batch might do this a little bit, but the films themselves, of course, Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith did it, but it's going to give us more of the Republic was already this human-centric, consumptive empire that just called itself a republic because it had some democratic safeguards that, over an incredibly quick time, 3 years is incredibly fast. Palpatine pulls the wool over everybody through this war, through the fear of death and loss of security, and we're going to see how that was already in the DNA of what the Republic was. And that's one of the lore things I'm really compelled by in the show. Obviously, the character, everything mentioned with the real world stuff about Cassian. I think the way the 1138 tweet went is, here's Diego Luna from Mexico telling a story about, I don't know if it was them or someone else, actually maybe someone speaking from a Mexican American experience, I believe, saying here's some Diego Luna from Mexico telling the Mexican story of being stopped in the street, being threatened of deportation or whatnot. It's in the first few minutes there, it did it. So I'm here for it. I'm ready to go. It's not Space Wizards. There are some senators, but it's going to be compelling.
Oh yeah, I don't want to take too much of our conversation. Something we could probably talk about later on. But Tony Gilroy. I mean, I do think Tony Gilroy doesn't, like, he's not like I am a Star Wars lore expert. He's not. He probably, to him, when he's writing these scripts, he's thinking about, okay, what can I tell about society and what our own world's looking like? Because there's a lot of the real world right now in Andor that's looking a little too. There are some moments like, oh, too real. I think he's kind of thinking more on that level of like, like dealing with our own kind of rise of fascism, the immigrant story, all that, and that's what. But he's also probably open to collaboration and sort of like do the homework, use the universe to your benefit. And I kind of made a bit of a dig meme of like, but of Filoni's type of fan service, like, and now Cassian meets Baby Yoda, and we get to learn how Andor was the one who saved Baby Yoda, and then here comes Ahsoka, and then the Mando, and it's gonna be they're gonna go on an adventure together. Like, no, that's not what Tony Gilroy's. I think that's honestly the type of fan service Tony Gilroy's getting at. Like, I'm gonna show you the Vader versus Kenobi duel again. Like he's not interested in that. He isn't interested in kind of, as you said, using the universe and the mythology as is to tell a story about how do rebellions form, what is the world under essentially fascist dystopia look like. And to be fair, there are a bunch of Easter eggs in Andor. Like I saw sequel aliens, Ochi's ship in one of the backgrounds. Aki from Rise of Skywalker. I thought the sequels were being retconned on that bus. So there are plenty of Easter eggs they're just not in your face about it. Like say maybe Mando likes to sometimes put them in your face, or even Kenobi was like, "Hey, look, it's the clone who's who's kind of down on his luck." Kind of a moment. But yeah, good stuff.
I mean, there's a place for both, and that's where we're getting at here. And I'm grateful that Deborah Chow can go plop a 501st clone on the streets there and do what she did, and then Tony Gilroy can come and do what he's doing. So here for it. Let's I'm never a fan of all or nothing, either or answers. They seem to be far too simple, far too easy. And so let's tell compelling stories, whether or not, they are Ahsoka and Grogu and Luke and whoever, and none of the above. I mean, we're getting the, like you said, we're getting the Imperial Senate, but again, comes back to Tony Gilroy not having a precious approach to Star Wars, which again, we all do. We're all here for it. Deborah Chow does. Dave Filoni definitely does, and I mean that in a good way. But the possibilities with Tony Gilroy are already apparent. All right. Speaking of everything we've talked about before, tell us a story of the formation of the Rebel Alliance.
The Rebel Alliance. Well, all began in the year 5 BBY. No, it all began in Southern California with a man named George Lucas. Well, that's true. That is true.
So there we go.
Obviously, Rebel Alliance, the good guys of A New Hope. What's interesting about the canon that we have now with the Rebellion is that it really does go back to the Return of the Jedi novelization. And they have stuck more or less with the broad story of Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, where senators in the Imperial Senate, they kind of watch from within just the Republic Empire just erode year after year after year. And they've been building little rebel network cells. And then eventually Mon Mothma with the first two go and, outright declare her opposition to the rebellion, to the Empire.
Mm-hmm.
And then she became one of the founding members of the Rebel Alliance, and that more or less stuck from Legends to canon. In Thrawn trilogy, we get the Mon Mothma, Bail, and Garm kind of triumphant, where Garm was the more extreme of the three, and Bail kind of kept the two together. And then without Bail, Garm went and did his own thing. It gets a little bit more messy when Force Unleashed. It kind of makes Starkiller like the most important person, and then never gets mentioned again in anything. And now we have canon, which pretty much is stuck with Mon Mothma gave her speech because of the Gorm massacre. In Legends, the Gorm massacre was when Tarkin landed his shuttle on a bunch of protesters, like literally squat. Sounds kind of funny in a sad way.
Sounds like how Chewie dies, apparently.
Yeah. Mon Mothma gave her his little speech, and then all the rebel cells that were kind of active at the time met on Dantooine. and then that's pretty much the basics of the Rebel Alliance story. And I guess I'll throw it to you, Matthew. How have you felt Star Wars from what you learned from Legends, but also in canon, screen and book? But we'll start with screen, obviously, have done in showing kind of fleshing out the rebellion and kind of guess your own thoughts on the Rebel Alliance as we've seen it throughout the years.
I mean, it connects. It brings up what you were saying with what we saw on Wednesday. It starts small. It starts in these small little cells. Rebels. As a show, it starts with this one little kid. Not little kid, but he's a teenager. He's a preteen on Lothal, and we meet up with this somewhat more organized group on the Ghost crew. And yeah, I mean, going through it's there isn't a complete comprehensive story maybe yet, but there is clearly one emerging. And just the more stories we get, the more things we see. We're getting at least different pieces involving involving senators who want to start using the system to their advantage, and then or to the advantage of more people, and then find out, oh no, we can't. It's a corrupt system. Folks like the Organas who are putting up a great front. There's Bail and Leia are Imperial senators, but they're also secretly funding the seditious terrorist group called the Alliance to Restore the Republic. There's that, and then of course there are the more radical elements like Saw and Luthen, and it's interesting to see maybe kind of what we got at. I don't know when we were talking about this. Maybe it was with Princess and the Scoundrel, or maybe it was when we were talking about radical politics, to see how things coalesce somewhat in the center between the far more establishment institutionalized groups such as Mon Mothma, but Mon Mothma before, while she was still in the Senate, wanting to win over Quarsh Panaka and say, hey, can you talk to your buddy Sheev to help us out here and help stop exploiting systems. And but bring that into the middle of saying, okay, we need an organized alliance to restore the Republic that is still a rebel alliance, but it's an alliance to restore the Republic. Whereas, like we talked about with Saw, we don't know what he wanted to restore. If he wanted to restore anything, if he cared about restoring, he gets marginalized. He gets stuck on the side. So, it's one that, I don't want to say is morally shiny. Knights in Shining Armor, of course, in A New Hope in 1977 it is, but it isn't. They aren't villains either. I mean, they are still protagonists, and they're still meant to hope for them and believe in them and trust that they are acting for the well-being of the whole galaxy, even if they're engaging in violence. And that's an interesting paradox, I think, that Andor especially is going to look into is, can soldiers, and here's my pacifist kind of brain going a little bit, can soldiers ultimately take the reins and fight for the well-being of all, or are they going to be driven into this dog eat dog, I must protect my own, must use violence? I mean, can soldiers, I mean, we saw it with Leia in Princess and the Scoundrel, for example. Can soldiers put down their weapons and actually use diplomacy and peace building? If I mean, and that's an open question. I don't know. I mean, if I asked any random member of the Canadian Armed Forces, the Royal Canadian Armed Forces, His Majesty's whatever, yeah, what your political views are, I think it'd be all across the board. It would be, some are, let's limit what's your foreign policy views. Let's limit aggression. Let's actually pursue diplomacy. We're just here as the last line of defense, as an insurance policy to make sure that the threats that don't get don't go out of hand. But then there are others. There are those, and that the Saw Gerrera, who were talking that character in the Obi-Wan comic who does go off the rails, right? We have that general Yeah, Doc would have the answer to his name, but yeah, it's. I mean, I'm tracking with it. To answer your long story short, I'm tracking with it. I appreciate what is. We can get into some more details in a minute, but um, I'm yeah, I'm not feeling we have a full picture, but I'm not feeling like it's this vague amorphous. I have no idea what's going on either.
No, I mean, I don't think any one show can ever truly tell the formation of the rebellion, because I think you can look at it from all sorts of angles, from Rebels to
Mm-hmm.
this show. Kind of as multiple, just sort of the showing, but also kind of showing like, oh, okay, like, well, when this rebel cell or this group was doing this, then now we kind of maybe the hint of like, oh, and on Lothal, Ezra was giving his little message. We actually saw that a little bit in Leia and the Princess and the Scoundrel, not like, oops, Leia Princess of Alderaan. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
wrong timeline. Where we got like a little message of Lothal. But the Rebel Alliance, at the end of the day, when George was making them, they are an armed opposition group. They are the Viet Cong, the Sandinistas at the time, maybe a little bit of the Bolshevik revolutionaries too. And kind of, I was talking to my friend who, Doc Channel, who's really into this stuff. It's like a lot of revolutionary groups, like they're big coalitions, but eventually they kind of will take the form of whoever's kind of managed to get into the positions of the leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Be it, the Soviets. We know Lenin died. You get Stalin, who was essentially just a Soviet gangster compared to Lenin, who was more of the academic. Sandinista, get Daniel Ortega. Even in the Mexican Revolution, you had the kind of the. I don't know, to go back to Mexico, where Diego Luna actually, I heard Diego Luna actually had like contact with the Zapatista movements, which are kind of like an autonomous, very leftist commune organization that started off with like Maoist guerrillas that managed to get some concessions in the 90s. Look it up, very interesting.
Yeah.
Where you had like your Pancho Villas, who are like the Slaw Guerreras. They're like, they didn't really have like an ideology, but they definitely wanted justice for the common people. And I think Slaw very much like that. Where it's like, it's not about forming a government so much as he's all about it's all about the next project, the next revolution, the next injustice to fight. And and Tony Gilroy himself said, we're gonna see when as the rebellion form, like how do, maybe not censors is the right word, but how do like a different type of leadership form in terms of like a broad base. You've got that broad base, and then kind of narrow it down. Especially when you have big coalition armed forces that we're all against the same thing. And then once the empire's gone, what's next? And not to jump too far ahead, but it's just something I want to just kind of put out there. Part of me kind of wants to see, after like a post Andor thing, where like you have parts of the Rebel Alliance, because it is a Rebel Alliance. It's not, they're all different people at the end of the day. It was all about different rebel cells coming together to join the Empire. Kind of look at the New Republic and like, I don't really want that. Like, I don't think everyone should be like, okay, happy New Republic times. It's a Rebel Alliance. So it's like, what if Saul lived to see the end of the Empire and kind of then split off and go his own thing? And what if other cells and groups were like, yeah, no, this ain't for me. We're gonna do our own thing now. Like, you start to see kind of the New Republic gets the core and stuff, but then you kind of have like it's sort of like, I can't think of here's kind of a sad example, maybe not the best, because there's some not, but like it's they were all kind of terrible. The Mujahideen in Afghanistan after the communist government fell, and then it was just total anarchy after that for a while. They were really great, to be quite honest, but that war was very messy. But sort of like you have this coalition of different groups who are only working together because they have a common enemy. What happens when that common enemy is gone? And that's sort of interesting to see as well. But yeah, I think that's definitely something to take in mind when it comes to the Rebel Alliance. They are sometimes romanticized, although I think Andor's going to make a more realistic version of armed opposition against your fascist government.
I mean, the closest thing we got to what you're describing is Bloodline, right? With you have the centrists and the populists, and none of them, I mean, with the exception of Clarice Indian, who is off helping start the First Order, none of them are actually like the Empire. I mean, they all remember it as an evil empire, but they have different approaches to centralized government because they're coming from different ideologies and different viewpoints. Even going further afield, you have that interesting little change in dialogue in The Last Jedi. What you have, oh my goodness, purple hair, Laura Dern. Why am I blank?
Holdo.
Yeah, Holdo being all, we are the spark that will restore the Republic, whereas you have Poe being, we are the spark that will burn the First Order down. There's two different perspectives that do carry on. Of course, Poe, he's more responsible than Saw Gerrera, but it's interesting.
My
That's a generational thing too. So go ahead.
I mean, my example would be, once the Empire falls, like what if Akbar decided, there's something wrong with the New Republic here. I'm gonna like make Mon Cala an independent group, and we're gonna, we got a problem with the beef of the New Republic, so we're gonna start arming up just in case.
Yeah, I mean, and I could have seen that. You could see that. I mean, again, you have Bloodline. You have, as I mentioned before, with Mon Mothma in the Aftermath trilogy, she's the first minister or first senator or whatever, or chancellor rather, trying to persuade the Senate to launch a fleet to go to Jakku, right?
Right.
The different things. So yeah, that's the Aftermath. I mean, talking about on screen, what we have a whole series called Rebels, right? And that does do a great job in it's an animated show. It skews somewhat younger. It skews younger than Clone Wars for sure. It doesn't skew as young as Resistance, but it does a good job showing the heroic side of this burgeoning rebel alliance, showing the human side in a real way. I mean, obviously there are Twi'leks and Tigridine and whatever, but the personal side of this, and in a way that I think Andor is, but not in the same way. It's not going to show the heroic side as much. Solo, we have the Cloud Riders, and they're definitely connected to Saw's partisans in Rogue One, but also we see the tensions in Rogue One. I like how you put in the notes Clone Wars and Bad Batch, because I thought we get Saw in the Onderon Rebels, and how Anakin and Anakin and Ahsoka go in and train these folks in guerrilla warfare to root out the separatists who've established a beachhead on their planet. And of course, Saw losing Stila in that violent way is part of what sets him on his path. But also this organized resistance that then just very easily morphs into these partisans, as we see at the beginning of Bad Batch. So there's that part of it, even using the Fulcrum, the origins of the Fulcrum code call sign we see in Clone Wars. The Confederacy, it's called the Confederacy of Independent Systems. And Joe, maybe you can talk a bit more about this, because I don't think enough has gone into how the Confederacy is a rebel faction. It is a rebel alliance. And we haven't done, because on screen what we've seen is they're mainly the bad guys, right? They're in the films and in the show, they're the antagonist. They're the rich guys. They're the corporate interests, trying to take all the money for themselves. But then you got the Bonteris. You got Lena. What's her name? Sorry, I have it written down. Nina Bonteri. Who is a friend of Padme and has common cause. There are heroes on all sides. Evil is everywhere. I do remember D. Bradley Baker coming back, and this is kind of demonstrates the point. D. Bradley Baker, when he came back to, or talking about coming back to voice Rex in Rebels, he said Rex it's hard for him because he has to now be in the role of what was the Separatists. He is the one fighting against this white-clad army that's taking orders from Coruscant, and it is this switch in mindset that, folks, I still hope, like Cassian, definitely like Lux Bonteri, that I'll get to in a few minutes, that might feel more natural to some folks, yeah,
Lux had a bit of a dark ending, if you remember from the Inferno Squad book. Did you ever read that?
yeah. So I will get into the Inferno Squad book in a little bit. I mean, well, I'll mention it now. I mean, Lux. I mean, this is of course set after A New Hope, but Lux is part of it. Kind of takes over the Partisans after Saw dies, and clearly he has taken the lessons from Anakin and Ahsoka, and because he ends up being connected, of course, to Saw's group, but also carrying on his mother's legacy as a separatist in that same way. And so, yeah, I mean, Joel, maybe you can speak more. How much has there been made of the Confederacy as a rebel faction before the Empire?
Better in Legends, I have to say. I think those Dark Horse comics, which I shared with you, did a better job of kind of showing more honorable separatists like Nita Von Terry compared to, every episode of like General Grievous and his new diabolical plan to wipe out the Jedi. Because the Plagueis book kind of deals into this of like they know the Outer Rim is like just ready for explosion. It just needs the right pin. They need the right pin, and they need like a center point, and that's why Palpatine kind of uses Dooku to like rally these disenfranchised people with legitimate grievances against the Republic, because the Republic is corrupt at the time, and the Outer Rim is getting screwed. And but through Palpatine's machinations, obviously, and Dooku's machinations, we're going to use the Techno Union and the Trade Federation, the Corporate Alliance, who in Legends they outright secede with the Republic. So it'd be like if Amazon seceded from the Union and joined the South or something like that, and just funded the war effort to fund the war effort.
That's not scary at all.
Confederacy. Different. Obviously, I honestly think the Confederacy in Legends is more sympathetic than our American Confederacy by far.
Yeah, two different use of the term.
Anyway. Oh yeah, big time. But in Legends, it was very much did a better job. It's like showing, Count Dooku rallied the Outer Rim world more or less to his cause. But the Separatists, obviously, because they were funded by the mega corporations that had massive droid armies, they were a far more scary rebellion because they could just pump out bajillions and bajillions of droids, and go after the Republic and prolong the war as long as Palpatine needed to. Also, I'm going to say hi, hello, Sam the Sham. Oh yeah, sorry, that was bugging me. Just gotta say hello. Love the sewing the comic. But yeah, they were the OG separatist, and also in the Dark Horse comics, especially in the Dark Time, you see like the separatist holdouts, mostly made up of like people who were fighting the Republic, now fighting the Empire, getting slaughtered by the Imperials. There's like a whole reconquest of the Outer Rim thing the Empire has to do to occupy those planets. So yeah, it is interesting to remember at the end of the day that the prequels, what they attempt to do, which you could say that it works or not depending on your point of view, they're trying to be the inverse of the Rebel Alliance and the Empire, where the Republic are the good guys and the Rebellion are the bad guys. But then obviously it's like, oh wait, shoot, this isn't actually true. Heroes on both sides because this is a rebellion, but it's a manufactured rebellion controlled by Palpatine, and the army is also the Republic is both controlled by Palpatine. So it's an interesting dynamic for sure.
I mean, what is true is that the grievances continue, right? And especially when you come on species lines. I mean, the centralized human controlled, and again, there's more or less made of that in canon or legends. Coruscant government, whatever it's called, I mean, even now, we have, even our society, Canada, the US, have center periphery tensions going on. We have Quebec and Alberta. We have rural versus urban. We have these tensions, and even to be sympathetic, for example, I lived in rural Alberta, where politically I disagreed with a lot of what everyone said. What a lot of people said, but they have a sense of, though, the big cities don't care about how we live. They look down on us as different and other, and are just going along at a pace according to their own interests. And no wonder people want to fight back. Now, it's easier to see that when it's called the Galactic Empire and you have the stormtroopers marching along, and clearly then it's easier to foment rebellion. But maybe put this way to put it this way: on screen or in canon, in the films and in Clone Wars, the emphasis for the CAS is on the Confederacy, kind of coded as the South, as the bad guys who wanted to were enemies of democracy for the sake of their cotton resources, their cotton industry or whatnot, or tobacco industry, or who knows what, and how the legacy of that continues on. Maybe in Legends, and maybe hopefully in Bad Batch and Andor, there's going to be the focus more on independent, on localized freedom and localized authority to discern what is best for our planets, our population. And I mean, that's the balance that federalism tries to achieve. That's the balance that the New Republic tries to, and maybe struggles or fails to achieve. But certainly one that the late Republic just completely botched and gave rise to the Empire, and the Empire didn't even try, right? So
I mean, that's something I hope to see Andor, if they really want to embrace this part. Like, how do mostly separatists and former Republic loyalists kind of come together against the Empire? Like the sad tragedy of the separatists is that they were people with legitimate grievances who got taken advantage of by the Sith and the corporations and the malicious people who would use those sorts of tensions for their own machinations and not the benefit of the individuals or the working people.
Yeah. And I guess one last thing I do want to point in there, the difference in with the Rebel Alliance is they have the path, and then they have Luke, and a relationship with the Jedi that harkens back to the Republic. And that it's interesting, something that doesn't entirely continue in the New Republic. As we saw in Princess and the Scoundrel, there was thought of it. There was thought of Luke being more involved in the formation of the New Republic. He's isn't interested. He goes off and does his own thing. But clearly, yeah. I mean, even Obi-Wan is his role. There is something that does lend it that even greater moral legitimacy, and at least in our eyes, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that's sort of the one kind of thing about Star Wars which you can't always apply to real life revolutionary organizations. Like, yeah, this real life organization, but it's also tied to this whole mysticism. Like, again, the Empire, the fascist state, and Palpatine's Nixon, but he's also an evil wizard with dark power and the connection to the dark forces of evil and all kind of that stuff. So yeah, I think that's like the one thing about the rebellion that's like almost hard to reconcile with like real life. In terms of, like,
I have a way to reconcile it. I can do it.
Okay.
I mean, the way where it goes, and it is kind of dicey, but Latin America, in all these, especially the nonviolent resistance movements, had a very strong clergy presence. It's something called liberation theology, and
that's true.
Yeah, a very strong sense of, here were priests and bishops and lay people who said, our Catholic faith demands that we see God having a preferential option for the poor, is the language they used. And the Star Wars version of that would be the Force is on the side of the little guy, right? And so we're compelled to take action. Sometimes it got kind of dicey. They did get involved in outright violent actions, revolutionary actions that the Vatican was on. Let's not do that. Let's not go that far. But you talk about Oscar Romero, who I mean, the legend has it he's celebrating mass, and he's giving a sermon on the evils of these government thugs, and he's gunned down right in the church there. And so there's that witness that, sorry, I'm using a churchy term. There's that example of people who, for their spiritual beliefs, were motivated to be present and to be a source of comfort and develop community and social bonds that were able to help resist these governments. I mean, the whole story about Pinochet, against Pinochet's regime in Chile, and the role of the church there it's one of the in a century where lots of scandals and lots of difficult, corrupt stories came out. That was one of the brighter ones. So
I feel like Andor's probably going for that Latin America kind of, because that's casting Diego Luna, his own personal. I actually found out a little tangent, but I had to say this because I think it's a cool story. Pedro Pascal, he's from Chile, and apparently the reason why he was born in America because his parents fled Chile during the Pinochet era because they were related to Salvador Allende. So they were like second cousins or something. So I just found it interesting, like, oh yeah, they have that kind of connection to these kind of horrible things that happen in Latin America because of, well, good old CIA friends.
There's that too. I mean, the empire being part of it.
But no, you're right. It's like, I've heard stories of like the church helping the revolutionary movements, but also church helping the government too.
Yeah, I mean that's also part of the story. I mean, that's again part of the story of the late Republic, right? Is the Jedi being so tied into this imperial system that then, of course, wipes them out too. But they're agents of their own demise. So go ahead.
Right, but just get back to our original topic. But no, I think Canon's done a really cool job of showing us especially a lot of these dark time stories, the seeds of the rebellion, starting with Saw and the Clone Wars, a little bit of Bad Batch. You're already starting to see like small acts of resistance. The Paths, obviously, in Kenobi. Andor and Rebels are kind of, in my mind, almost unofficial sister series or cousins, depending on what you want to look at, in terms of like they're going to be more. I mean, obviously, they're more or less kind of going through the same kind of timeline, 5 to 0 BBY, and showing us the formation of the rebellion. Rebels has one kind of tone, vibe to it. Andor is definitely going for a bit more of a grittier one, but still very much, the same thing. And obviously, Rogue One is not the culmination, obviously, because obviously you think that's the turn of the Jedi, but definitely the turning point to when it's time to now take full action and go to war. The time for diplomacy was always over.
Yeah. I mean, Andor and Rebels, they both have Mon Mothma, they both have Saw Gerrera.
It's true. So. Yeah. So yeah, Saw Gerrera has sort of been, or Jedi Fallen Order too. Saw Gerrera was in that, so he has very much been kind of a consistent through line as well. But to move to paper canon, there's I feel like the books will probably, I mean, obviously they go over the Rebel Alliance story in terms of the background, but the books have so far kind of not covered in depth this era of like the dark times in great length. I mean, we got Karkin, we got Catalyst, sure. I mean, sure, we got a lot, but like, I feel like the TV shows right now are kind of, this is Dark Times is also kind of our bread and butter. You brought up the Nile from the High Republic, and so the Nile is an interesting one for me right now, because I've sort of said Star Wars doesn't do gray factions very well. We don't have a lot of good morally gray factions. Because, like, in my mind, Saw Gerrera, you could question his actions sometimes, but he's on the side of the rebellion. He likes the Jedi. He's a good guy at the end of the day, And you could be the nicest person in the world. If you're part of the Empire, you're still a bad guy.
That's true.
It doesn't matter how nice you are. You're still a bad guy unless you're defecting. If you're helping the evil system, that's not good regardless. The Nile right now, I can't get a good read on them if they're like just kind of an evil faction. Like, they've done nothing to say that make me sympathize with them in a big sense. And obviously they're kind of going more on the dark path because Martian Rose seems to be kind of an evil schemer. So I've kind of not gotten a sense to them. And compared to say like the Mandalorians, who in my mind are a very good example of a gray faction.
Mm-hmm.
They're neither good, they're neither evil. Sometimes they'll help you out, but sometimes they just want to conquer because they're Mandalorians. That's
Yeah.
what they do.
I mean, I just want to say the only reason I brought up the Nile is to say even 200 years before this, before everything, all 230. You know, I brought up the Separatists. Well, again, a couple centuries before that, there was still, there was never fully consensus, even when we call it the High Republic. The Republic at its height, its most pristine, supposedly, the Jedi at its most valiant and valorous and virtuous. In other words, to start with V. The Nihil are still there saying, wait a minute, hold on. We don't want to be bossed around by anyone from Coruscant either. And so it just throughout history, I don't think there's ever been, I mean, there's a little bit of a golden age in the High Republic, but even then, there are still people who will question the legitimacy and the hegemony of a Coruscant government. And so just to say that, bring that up, that this isn't necessarily new. It's just, relating it what we were saying before with the Separatists, it's, the Rebel Alliance is the only one where we're supposed to read them as protagonists. I'm sure you could read some aspects of the Nile as protagonists. I mean, that's what the Luminous authors do go into, and saying, just questioning this sense of golden age, questioning Lena So's brash confidence in we are all the Republic. Well, hold on, we ain't. And yeah, they do end up doing terrible things, but and Mark Unruh is clearly a villain. But just to say, there's no time the Republic can look back and say, oh, they, we're it, and there's nothing else. So that was my point there.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's sort of the ever growing story of the Outer Rims. It's always sort of like same shucks, different day. Like Empire, Republic, Sith, Jedi. Life for us kind of sucks, regardless. And it's like only now in like the Mando era, where it's like I feel like the Mandalorian and some of its actions are trying to do some good to these Outer Rim folks, or just trying to live their lives in their local communities. And the Sham ask, would the golden age of the Jedi be with Luke and Rey? I don't know. We haven't really explored it yet. So, given that it's set in the past, we don't know if the Jedi last 100,000 years. Rey Academy may be the golden age. I mean, who knows? That'd be cool to see.
Yeah.
That would be cool to see. But like a lot of paper canon, we've seen different rebel cells and organizations throughout the various books. Obviously, Rebel Rising, we see a really good insight into Saw. Lots of good moments of, kind of Saw kind of talking about the formation of the rebellion at the time with Jyn when she was still young. Tarkin shows like a little bit of a rebel cell. There's even a moment in Catalyst where like Galen and Krennic are talking, and Galen's like, the war's over, and it's like Krennic is more like put on pause. Because he feels like, the Separatists might be gone, but it's like, oh, there's still problems out there, and we got to be ready. Let's think of other good books. We got Lords of the Sith that showed Cham. We don't talk about Cham Syndulla a lot on this show, and I feel bad. He
hasn't gotten enough airtime, I don't think. I mean, he's a good example of someone who wants to be localized and who wants to be left alone. So there's that.
He's he's an odd one because he's like kind of in. Oh, you get me on mute. He's like somewhat in the Saw Gerrera camp of rebellion. Like he was obviously I feel like he was a senator. No, he wasn't a senator, but he had some government position. He was
the local. He had the moral authority. He had the mandate, if you will say. I don't know if he was ever elected or anything, but because the senator Ornfrey Tah, he's off on Coruscant doing his. Yeah, that's true. Like Ornfrey Tah is off on Coruscant, demonstrating how much it already is the Empire, right? And you see in Lords of the Sith, as you mentioned, that he's still there. We saw in Bad Batch, he's still there. Lords of the Sith, he's still there. just as a puppet for Palpatine. So in light of that, yeah, you have Cham, and you then of course have his daughter that we mentioned in Rebels or alluded to, taking the fight. But of course, the difference between Cham and Hera, as we all know, is Cham wants to stay on Ryloth and just be among the Twi'leks for the Twi'leks, whereas Hera has this more galactic vision. She is out there. She has a stronger sense. I mean, Cham is a bit like the Gungans, right? What do we have to do with the Naboo? What do we have to do with humans or whoever else? We just want to stay by ourselves and be left alone. And Hera has a sense of we're all symbiotically connected, and so I have to go out and I actually have to, contribute what I've learned from you, Father. But
I think I think they do a good job of showing both can be possible. Like Cham, I think should that's his focus on your local town. Like
true,
you can do the most good there, do the most good in your little area, and it did work out. Ryloth was independent for the entire New Republic era, and even that Star Wars Resistance Rising that they kind of were able to.
But Hera did have to give her father a talking to about that a little bit, just that's to say, there's one thing I do want to get into before we kind of get to the end is the moment. I mean, again, we've had it since I bring this up because 1977. It's been in our minds. Leia to Tarkin. The more you squeeze your fingers, the more star systems rally to our cause. That whole squeezing the fingers, paper canon has gone into that a little bit, and I think this is also the 1138 tweet and whatnot. The role of the Death Star in the formation of the Rebel Alliance, and where that comes down to is, and this connects with everything you're saying about the abolition of the Senate and relying on governors and the Death Star to rule through fear, and fear, this symbol of anyone's planet could just be blown up at any time. Yes, that was Krennic's vision a little bit. He kind of oversaw the science of it. That was what's known in the Tarkin novel, in the Darth Vader comic in 2015, the Tarkin doctrine. That I think.
That's a Legends thing too.
That's a Legends thing too. Okay, fair enough. But the idea of you rule through the fear of one centralized power that no one can stand up to, that's too big to stand up to. And what it ends up doing is giving you a massive moon-sized target or creating a massive moon-sized target. It's a 2-meter hole, but it provides the Alderaanians and the Alderaanians in exile, and it provides Bail with a reason to contact Obi-Wan, and it provides
Saul was looking through it the whole time. I think that was his obsession.
What Saul was looking for, it provides Radis and all the Rebel Alliance, all the rebels that do mobilize to Scarif, and then of course to Yavin. Yavin, it provides them with this focal point. Say we hit this, we score a first major blow to the Empire. It's a house of cards. It'll be one thing that not everything will topple, but it'll be a huge step that will then create the PR victory that can rally more people and say we can actually do this. We can actually succeed in this alliance. And of course, that is what happens, right? That the rebels destroy the Death Star. Luke destroys the Death Star. Tarkin dies. The Empire is set back decades, and in his place is Cassio Tag. And in the 2015 comic, we see Tag is actually promoted to the head of the Imperial Army, and Vader's actually for a time, Palpatine makes Vader kind of Tag's assistant a little bit. And the reason for that is because Tag had a different doctrine. He said, let's not consolidate everything. Let's actually spread ourselves out as far as possible and as comprehensively as possible, using the reasonably sized Imperial Star Destroyers that are bigger than Venators, but they're not They're not super Star Destroyers, and they're definitely not Death Stars, and they have the reach and they have the ability. Maybe he probably opposed the abolition of the Senate. Say we can still use those legislative institutional means to work through all the different ways of centralizing authority, but maintaining the connections. And that's the thing, is the practical connection, mobilization, and so. But by this point, they're just playing catch up. By this point, they're rushing to send out and find out these rebel cells. Yes, by Empire Strikes Back, they've built back their authority, but then they end up doing it again with the Tarkin Doctrine, with the second Death Star. You mentioned the Thrawn novels, and I just want to put one thing here is, so Cassio Tag, he, clearly has probably some economic interest with the Tag Corps, and led by, of course, his sister Domina, which we see also in the Dr. Aphra comics. Thrawn puts two and two together. He sees all this duonium being compiled into one place, in one hidden place, and he says, "No, wait a minute. We're making this massive massive station. This is a bad idea. We need to spread out. We need to have as much presence, actual firepower as far as we can." And of course, ultimately Tag and Thrawn are ignored in favor of Tarkin, in favor of Palpatine's own arrogance and his own sense of invincibility. And as Leia says, the more you tighten your fingers, the more star systems rally to our cause. We have Mon Mothma, like we said a few weeks ago. The Emperor is actually on on this station. Here's our target. Let's go, Andor. And so and it relates, of course, to Exegol, right? The massive fleet. So that's my thought. And go ahead.
No, I do. It's great, and my friend on our podcast during when we were on Doc brought up a good point about older. Bless you. Older officers in Andor, and the thing I've always found kind of interesting about the pre A New Hope era is you see a lot of older Imperial officers, like guys who look like in their 60s. Probably who were around when the Republic was still at its height, or at least in its dying ethers. And the thing kind of
like Yularen and whatnot, right?
Yeah, Yularen, Tarkin, all those guys. Tag did all those guys. Mahdi. But the thing is, thematically, obviously not logistically, but thematically, once the Death Star dies, destroyed, the thing is, and this is even in canon and in Legends, all the high-ranking senior officers, like a good chunk of them, they all die. Like there's a lot of loss of some of the best and the brightest older.
Lost Stars goes into that a little bit too, right?
Bit of a brain drain there as well, and even in Endor, going back to the Legends, the Executor, when the Executor is destroyed, you lose a lot of the proteges. My friend had the trouble with this word too. What's like a smart kid who is super talented at something? Prodigies, all the prodigies.
It's related to proteges, prodigy.
All the prodigies of Imperial officers, and I'm sure in canon that's the same as well. So you get kind of stuck with the dregs or the radicals or kind of the people who survived because they got lucky, all the yes men. So that the Tarkin Doctrine kind of blew up in the Emperor's face twice, and the Empire lost some of its more talented individuals, like actually competent Imperial officers, and kind of got stuck with just the not either the complete crazies. I mean, they're all evil to a certain extent, but just crazy people, or the grunts, the people who are going to get promoted to general because all the generals are dead.
It's how Sanari in her 20s, I guess, gets command of a Star Destroyer at Jakku. She's all that's left. What's her name? Zara in the main Charles Soule's Star Wars comic after Empire Strikes Back. I mean, it's a similar thing. She was Tarkin's protege, and Tarkin's gone, and so there's no one to actually train her up to be a masterful leader that she could have been. So she's resentful it's a similar kind of thing, right? The loss of institutional memory, the loss of, you can say, generational wisdom, even if it's for this evil empire. It's a great contrast to the rebellion, right? To the way the rebellion wasn't, I mean, would never be capable of consolidating in that way. Maybe they could have had their access to Death Star tech, but they never tried to would never try to build the Death Star. I mean, the New Republic refuses to actually mobilize an army at all in part because, I mean, that's what the Empire did, because it's so easily defeated. In part, it's strategically invaluable, or truly not as valuable. And that's a great point. The brain drain
And the
makes it easier.
rebellion, because of the way they operate as well, because of their alien friendly, they got aliens who are like 200 years old.
Yeah,
probably. Like Akbar's probably like what, in his 80s by the time of Return of the Jedi. Still, he's still got another 100 years left in him, and he's seen a lot. And he probably got older aliens too.
Tarful, Mouse Canada, probably.
Luke gets trained by Yoda, the most Jedi of the Jedi. What, the oldest officer in the Empire, probably in his 80s at that point. Maybe even 60s at best. So that's kind of the experience there.
So interesting. All that to say, yeah, I mean, a lot of things came together, and it is believable that the rebellion won. I mean that's the basic theme in Star Wars that we always say is, dog eat dog, fighting for yourself is just going to splinter yourself apart, and working together for the good of all, that creates a team and a society that can actually be productive and move forward.
Yeah, or at least gotta unite against the common enemy, which the rebellion is. Like you got ex-separatist partisans, Republic loyalists. Like think about it. Saw Gerrera, he hates the separatists. He probably doesn't have much respect or love for Mon Mothma either, but he's still working with probably some proto-separatist people who he probably fought against in the Clone Wars, and Mon Mothma, who probably thought she thought like, oh, she's just in her little ivory tower drinking wine while the rest of us suffer. And vice versa. I'm sure Mon Mothma was like, you're a separatist. I saw what Count Dooku did. I saw what General Grievous did. So, whether or not Andor itself goes into that, just kind of an interesting kind of, all these various factions did come together to make the fight against the Empire.
I think it's the type of thing Bad Batch will go into. I'd like to see that, because I mean, again, it's animated, so it does, and that's what Bad Batch and Clone Wars does. It goes for those moral themes more directly. So, I'd like to see that. I really would.
And I'd like to see, post Andor kind of show, maybe other governments formed as well. Like I remember Aftermath talking about, like, there's a neo-separatist union afterwards getting formed. Like
there's that pirate fleet,
pirate fleet. So like and the New Republic isn't supposed to be as massive as the Old Republic ever got. It's supposed to be kind of, it's got the core, got a bit of the mid rim, got a few outer rim worlds like Mon Cala maybe, but that's about it. So kind of, but that's the rebellion, the story of the Rebel Alliance.
Sounds good. Do you have any maybe closing thoughts on the Rebel Alliance? Maybe what you'd like to see more?
I think I'd like to see more, and maybe Andor will be the one that does it. I don't know, but more direct, kind of that what happened to the separatist remnants who were not all General Grievous and Count Dooku and Nute Gunray, and kind of like what happened to them. The separatist holdouts, like in Legends, that kind of were the early proto rebels at the time. Kind of see them kind of get merged into this greater group. Love to, of course, see how do, at the end of the day, people like Mon Mothma and Bail and Draven and the more disciplined military people. Did you forget Draven's name for a second?
No, I'm just saying Draven is not Luthen. He's different.
I know. I get confused too. Kind of come into the rebellion proper and become, Tony Gilroy said, like, how do they become the leaders once you take the company corporate, as Tony Gilroy quoted. That's kind of see how that kind of forms, and
Yeah.
really see all these stories come together to make one great meta story.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Bridging the prequels and the original trilogy. It's all one. It's all a mainquel. Bring it all together. There we go. All
Mhm.
right. I guess that's a good place to wrap things up. So thank you for all for joining us and for watching or listening. If you like what you heard, have some thoughts, feel free to add in the comments below, or let us know on Twitter or Instagram at Ion Cannon Pod. If you want to join our Discord, send us a DM and we'll send you the link as well. Please do give this video a like, a share, and subscribe to the Underworld channel if you haven't done so already. Joel, where can they find you?
You can find me at JID 2021. Again, JID 2021, where I tweet stuff. But I mostly will tweet on the Ion Cannon Pod for our Star Wars centric stuff. And I put some interesting threads like that 1138 one, and a one about how the opening of Andor is very much the Hispanic immigrant story in one scene.
Yeah, some really great conversations going on there, especially in the light of this new Star Wars story that's come out on Disney Plus. You can find me on Twitter at NEUG45, on Instagram at MNEUG1138. Again, I'm also doing a little bit there at Ion Cannon Pod, but also doing my own stuff. Check out, I'm gonna get my photos of I was at Hamilton Comic Con. I forgot to mention that. Chatted with EK Johnson for a bit, but I'm not necessarily going to tweet anything about that, but uh my con hall was Star
Nice.
Wars con hall at Hamilton Comic Con, local con here in the Toronto area. Of course, you can also again find us on our Twitch at Ion Cannon Pod, Twitter, our videos here on Twitter on Ion Cannon Pod, Instagram or sorry, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just search Ion Cannon, that logo that way up above Joel there. So the other side, that one, it'll look like that. The blue, the Iron Cannon Pod. Give us a look, give us a like, give us a follow, and of course Tractor Beam every Thursday or Friday as well. My short 10-15 minute comic reviews. You can also follow the network at BSWU. Check out the race side. She's taking a break tonight, but check her out next week. And of course, Tales from Beyond the Galaxy and the flagship Star Wars Underworld podcast on Thursday nights. All right, next week we're probably still sorting out what we're going to do, but we can maybe get into a bit of a High Republic news roundup. Should be some stuff because Path of Deceit Phase 2, it's on its way. I thought I was going to get it today. Turns out it's coming out next week. False promises from emails, but you know how it is. Pre-orders work, embargoes, etc., etc. I'm looking forward to that. I know I'm diving into that. Looking forward to Phase 2 of the High Republic. So yeah, probably some news coming your way on that next week. But until then, Joel, let's blow this thing and head home.